Tom Regan was halfway through an experimental pizza when the invitation arrived. It wasn't the kind of moment that usually changes a life. He was in socks, wearing a shirt that read, "Photosynthesize this," and watching a documentary about moss colonies forming voting blocks. But then his laptop pinged, and the screen glitched in a way that strongly suggested the email wasn't from anyone on Earth. The subject line read, "Esteemed delegate, you are invited to the Royal Convergence of Celeria." At first, Tom assumed it was spam or, at best, an oddly creative phishing attempt. He clicked out of morbid curiosity, preparing to laugh. Instead, a holographic seal rose from the screen, an elegant crest shaped like a crescent moon entangled with glowing vines. A voice, soft and accented like a sleep-deprived opera singer, intoned, "Your presence is honored, Earth emissary. Please confirm transport coordinates for event of highest ceremonial import." Tom stared, blinked, took another bite of pizza. The voice repeated the message, slightly louder, and this time added, "Transport window expires in 42 Earth Standard Minutes." He looked around his apartment, which consisted mostly of half-filled mugs, overwatered ferns, and a calendar that still displayed February despite it being June. He was certain no one from Earth had asked him to represent them. Then again, Tom worked as a junior xenobotany analyst, meaning his job mostly involved cataloging weird alien plants from satellites. It wasn't impossible some intergalactic clerical error had made him the world's representative. He clicked, "Accept." 30 seconds later, a circular metallic disc, the size of a pizza stone, appeared under his chair and hummed ominously. Before he could regret his decision, the air around him twisted into translucent ribbons of light, and he vanished from his apartment, leaving behind the smell of melted cheese and mild confusion. He reappeared aboard what could only be described as a flying architectural fever dream. The floor beneath his feet shimmered with moving constellations, and translucent walls revealed sweeping views of nebulae and drifting starlight like a cosmic screensaver. Music played from somewhere. It sounded like wind chimes fighting with bagpipes, but rhythmically. A Solarian greeter with chartreuse skin and eyebrows that danced independently of her face approached him with a clipboard. "Delegate Tom Regan of Earth S. Cultural Curiosity Office, correct?" Tom, still blinking and mildly vibrating from the teleportation, nodded. "Yes, that, precisely. I am curious, culturally." The greeter smiled politely, but her eyebrows looked skeptical. "Your documentation will arrive shortly. Meanwhile, feel free to explore the pre-ceremonial deck. Formal wear is highly recommended but not mandatory for primitives. Pardon me, pre-intergalactic species." Tom wandered the vessel, dodging floating snack trays and avoiding conversations with creatures that looked like they had extra mouths for decoration. The ship bustled with alien royalty and dignitaries in robes made of plasma, feathers, or in one case, what looked like tax forms stitched together. He passed a being shaped entirely of water who offered him a handshake, then left a puddle on the floor after Tom squeezed too hard. Eventually, he found the wardrobe chamber, a room staffed by glowing mannequins that hummed when touched. One measured him telepathically and forced him into a formal robe that felt suspiciously like it had opinions. When he asked for shoes, a small floating orb sprayed foam over his feet that hardened into sandals and whispered something flattering about his arches. Then the doors opened onto the ceremonial platform. Tom squinted. The light was bright, golden, warm, too warm. The ceiling of the reception hall seemed alive, glittering with what he thought were chandeliers until they whispered gossip about him in a language he could somehow understand. Something about his sweaty confidence. The room was filled with figures that all looked humanoid but refined, taller, elegant, with a soft bioluminescence that seemed to come from beneath the skin. And their ears, long, curved, and expressive, twitched when they laughed or whispered or turned. Then she entered. Princess Vayari didn't walk so much as glide. Her gown shimmered like oil on water, and her long ears were adorned with intricate silver loops that moved like wind chimes. Her eyes scanned the crowd like she was hunting boredom. When she saw Tom, she paused. Tom waved. He immediately regretted that. What kind of dignitary waves like he's greeting a neighbor taking out the trash? Vayari tilted her head, amused. Her ears flicked, then shimmered. A gesture of curiosity, or maybe pity. Tom was then escorted to a seat far closer to the throne dais than he was comfortable with. On his left was a lizard diplomat who smelled like cinnamon. On his right was a being composed entirely of vaporous laughter, which made Tom feel vaguely complimented and deeply confused. The ceremony began. There were speeches in no fewer than 7 languages, at least 3 of which used tentacle sign language. Tom clapped when others clapped. He laughed when others laughed. At one point, a levitating orb hovered in front of him and spat a puff of celebratory smoke into his face. He thanked it. Then came the banquet. It started politely, glowing fruits, gelatinous cubes, a protein that apologized before being eaten. But then came the dessert. A centerpiece that looked like a cross between a cake and a moon rock was served by crystalline insects who chirped in harmony. Tom, trying to be diplomatic, used the ceremonial fork provided, which turned out to be a musical instrument. As soon as he tapped the dessert, it exploded in a burst of shimmering mist and blueberry-scented gas, drenching him and 3 others. A hush fell, and then Vayari laughed. It wasn't a polite titter. It was a full, delighted laugh that caused her ears to sparkle and 3 attendants to faint. She walked straight over to Tom, took his hand, and said something in her native tongue that caused every scribe in the room to freeze. He smiled weakly. Was that a toast? No one laughed. The royal interpreter dropped his stylus. The queen narrowed her eyes. Vayari just smiled at him like she'd set a trap and was impressed he hadn't even noticed. The lizard diplomat beside him coughed and whispered, "I believe you just got engaged." Tom's first instinct was to pretend he hadn't heard the lizard. "Engaged," he whispered, mostly to the tablecloth, which was trying to change colors to match his anxiety. "Engaged as in marriage." The lizard nodded solemnly, licking its own eye in what might have been a sympathetic gesture. "Indeed, you have been earmarked. It's an ancient and legally binding tradition among the Solarian elite, very rare, very shiny." Tom leaned back in his chair. The fork was still humming from when he accidentally played a national anthem into his dessert. Someone handed him a napkin that smelled like starfruit and disappointment. His voice cracked. "But I didn't do anything. I was just standing here." Dessert exploded. "That's not a proposal, that's a culinary accident." The vapor being on his other side rippled with laughter, a sound like champagne bubbling through velvet. "Oh dear," it said or implied. Tom wasn't sure how vapor got its point across, but it definitely radiated mischief. "You poor soggy man, she likes you. This is how Solarian royalty flirts. You got chosen. Lucky." Tom stared across the room at Princess Vayari, who was sipping a neon cocktail that looked illegal in most solar systems. She caught his gaze and gave him a wink so confident it made his knees threat a general strike. He turned back to the lizard. "There has to be some kind of out clause, right? A form to file, a duel I can lose gracefully." "Declining a royal earmarking," the lizard said, adjusting its ceremonial sash made of beetle wings, "is possible. But unwise. You de-insult the crown, and possibly ignite a minor diplomatic incident, possibly war, or worse, an official disappointment glare from the queen." Tom's inner monologue ran through several high-pitched vowel sounds. "Okay," he breathed. "So I'm accidentally engaged to an alien princess with weaponized ears, and if I say no, I ruin interstellar relations. Got it." A cheerful chime rang through the hall, followed by a voice announcing the commencement of the prebonding formalities. Dignitaries began rising and moving toward an archway lined with vines that swayed when looked at directly. Someone gently grabbed Tom's elbow. It was a Solarian attendant dressed in robes made of liquid shadow. "The princess awaits you in the ritual grove. Please don't resist. It won't help." The ritual grove, it turned out, was a floating garden inside a pocket dimension, tucked between real space and something that smelled like toasted cinnamon. Tom was escorted onto a gravity-neutral platform shaped like a lotus blossom, where Vayari stood surrounded by flora that blinked politely and whistled when bored. She turned and smiled, her ears flicking. "You came." Tom stepped cautiously onto the platform. "I was told resisting wouldn't help." "That's true," she said, "but I appreciate the honesty." She gestured to a circular patch of moss that immediately adjusted itself to resemble a plush velvet couch. "Sit." Tom obeyed. The moss vibrated under him, then said in a deep voice, "Good luck, meat suit." Vayari sat beside him, folding her hands in her lap. "I know this must be strange for you." "Oh, you think?" She smiled again. "I watched you all night. You laughed at the chandelier when it gossiped. You bowed to the appetizers. And you played a diplomatic anthem with a dessert fork. You're unlike anyone I've met in decades." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "You do realize I'm not a real diplomat, right? I'm a botanist, mostly part-time. Once I got written up for overwatering an alien cactus with self-esteem issues." "I like that," she said. "You're accidental, spontaneous. It's refreshing. Everyone else here has an agenda or a title or a neural enhancement plan. You just exist." "Well, I also scream a lot internally, but thank you." Vayari laughed. Her ears shimmered again, and Tom realized it wasn't just bioluminescence. It was emotional, like mood rings but with alien cartilage. She stood. "As per the pre-bonding protocol, we must complete the trials. If you wish to reconsider by the end of them, you may. You'll have every opportunity to humiliate yourself and retreat with minimal honor." Tom stood as well. "That sounds terrifyingly fair." The first trial was Dance of the Dual Stars. It involved choreographed movement on a rotating platform suspended over a bottomless void. The music was generated by the emotional resonance of the dancer's thoughts, which meant every time Tom panicked, the orchestra behind them played what sounded like a toddler screaming into a tuba. Vayari danced like starlight. Tom danced like someone dodging invisible jellyfish. Afterward, she applauded and called it abstract. The second trial was the scent-matching ceremony, where they had to find each other blindfolded in a chamber filled with hundreds of randomized pheromone clouds. The attendants handed Tom a blindfold made of scented silk and a polite suggestion to avoid licking anything. Tom stumbled through the chamber, sneezing and colliding with invisible walls. One cloud smelled like regret. Another smelled like cinnamon toast and betrayal. Eventually, he caught a whiff of something warm, sharp, and curious. He followed it like a sleep-deprived bloodhound until he collided with Vayari, sending them both tumbling into a pile of sentient ferns that applauded. The third trial was more serious, a simulated duel against a symbol of shared adversity. The simulator produced a creature that looked like a toaster had made unholy love to a lobster and then been electrocuted. It screamed in binary and immediately tried to eat Tom's shoes. Vayari armed him with what looked like a spatula fused with a plasma rifle. "Just aim, don't ask questions." Tom fired wildly. He missed the creature but hit a reflective panel, which bounced the blast into the control node, short-circuiting the entire simulation. The arena glitched into a fireworks show, and a digital voice declared, "Trial passed. Unconventional success." Vayari turned to him with a strange expression. "You broke the system." "I do that a lot," he said, "usually on accident. Once I crashed my neighbor's smart fridge with a playlist." They were quiet for a moment, standing in the flickering afterglow of the broken arena. Finally, she asked, "Do you want to back out?" Tom looked at her, at the faint smirk, the unreadable eyes, the shimmering ears. He thought about his apartment filled with neglected houseplants, and a life mostly revolving around edible experiments and spreadsheet errors. "I mean," he said, "do I get a snack break first?" She nodded solemnly, as is tradition. They walked off together, past the glitching arena, into the waiting scent of warm sugar and something beginning to feel suspiciously like destiny. Tom was awakened the next morning by a robe, not wearing one, being woken up by one. Specifically, it poked him in the forehead with one of its tassels and said, in a voice reminiscent of a judgmental librarian, "You have a royal schedule. You're already 9 heartbeats late." Tom sat up, confused and slightly sweaty. His bed was hovering 3 feet off the ground and purring. The room smelled like ozone and something tangy. His outfit from yesterday was floating in the corner, soaking itself in what looked like liquid glitter. The robe, long, regal, and definitely alive, draped itself around his shoulders before he could protest. "Wait," he said, blinking. "Where am I?" "You are in the North Petal Suite of the Royal Blossom Spire," the robe said. "Home of the princess. Also, you snore in bass 7 patterns. It's hypnotic." Tom stood, wobbling. Why does everything on this planet talk, including furniture? "The more important question," said the robe, tightening around him like a polite boa constrictor, "is why you didn't read the morning itinerary. You're to meet with the Royal Legal Codex Keeper regarding your pending nuptials, then breakfast, then a palace tour, then a ceremonial inspection of your grooming." "I'm being legally inspected." Tom scratched his chin. "I haven't even legally inspected myself today." As if summoned, a spherical drone with an array of grooming tools floated into the room and began humming ominously. It spritzed Tom with something lemony, shaved nothing but still looked disappointed, and circled his head while mumbling diagnostics. Then it beeped in approval and played a celebratory jingle that sounded like a ukulele with jet lag. 15 minutes later, Tom was led through a corridor shaped like a helix made of light. The palace bustled with floating dignitaries, translucent guards in armor made from compressed symphonies, and vending machines that offered existential advice alongside snacks. Tom passed a mirror that didn't reflect him but instead showed 3 versions of himself, one smiling, one running, and one sobbing into a bowl of cereal. "That one's uncomfortably accurate," he muttered. The robe made a sound that might have been a chuckle. "You are processing well for someone thrust into galactic prominence via dessert explosion." They arrived in a chamber lined with floating scrolls and holographic ink. At the center sat a being made entirely of eyes. Dozens of them, blinking and swiveling on stalks, each wearing tiny glasses. It introduced itself as Macravel, the Codex Keeper, and immediately launched into a rapid-fire briefing. According to Solarian Code 16b, subsection Glimmerdash, a royal earmarking, once spoken in the presence of a legal quorum and under the planetary moonlight, is deemed precontractually binding, pending formal trials and groom assessment, of which 3 of 3 have been completed. Unconventionally, Tom nodded as if any of that made sense. "You now have 24 standard Solarian time cycles to either commit to the bonding ceremony," Macravel continued, "or respectfully withdraw and face mild to severe diplomatic fallout, including but not limited to interspecies shame tournaments, symbolic flag-biting, and an uncomfortable dinner with the Queen." Tom's hands rose instinctively. "Can I maybe postpone the ceremony, like a rain delay?" "Emotions do not qualify as weather," Macravel said, somehow insulted. "But you may request a clarity walk. It is traditional." A new voice called from behind, "But not mandatory." Vayari entered the chamber like she owned it, which, Tom was pretty sure, she technically did. Today she wore a suit of shimmering threads that shifted colors as she moved. Her ears were relaxed but a little too still. "Am I interrupting something bureaucratically thrilling?" she asked. "We're discussing my upcoming panic attack," Tom said. "Also marriage." Vayari dismissed the Codex Keeper with a glance, and Macravel vanished into a puff of paperwork. She turned to Tom. "I didn't mean to push you. It was funny at first, and you handled it better than I expected. But if you want out, you can say it. I won't vaporize you." Tom looked at her, studied the slight tension in her jaw, the almost hidden way her hands clenched. He didn't know much about royal customs or legal codes, or whether the breakfast menu would try to bite him. But he did know that she was serious. "I'm not afraid of you," he said slowly. I'm afraid of everything around you. The titles, the galaxy watching, the part where I accidentally get someone's name wrong and it starts a civil war. Vayari smiled faintly. That's why I like you. You're not trying to impress me, you're just surviving. I'm extremely good at surviving. They walked through the palace gardens, where gravity didn't always work and the flowers whistled theme songs when touched. They passed a pond that reflected only the things people wanted to see. Tom saw a small, peaceful apartment with an extremely large coffee mug and one sentient plant. They stopped at a bridge made of crystalline music which played notes as they stepped across. "Can I ask something?" Tom said. "Why me, really?" Vayari leaned on the railing. "You were the only person in that room who didn't want anything from me. Everyone else measured what I could give them: political ties, favor, legacy. You were just trying not to pass out in your robe. I was also very focused on whether my appetizer was judging me." "Exactly. I'm tired of everyone treating me like I'm a throne with legs." "You have very nice legs," Tom blurted, then immediately wanted to drown himself in the music bridge. Vayari laughed, a sound that sent 3 nearby trees into blossom. She sobered after a moment. "My mother doesn't think I'm serious about you. She's arranged a final test before the wedding. If you fail, I'm off the hook. If you pass, we get married." Tom's mouth went dry. "What kind of test? Is it going to involve fire or brain puzzles or milk?" "She calls it proof of heart. It's never been done with an off-worlder before. There are 3 stages. One tests loyalty. One tests intention. The third tests instinct. Can't we just go bowling?" "She doesn't bowl. She disintegrates pins with her mind." The robe around him tightened in support. The trees continued to bloom nervously. Somewhere in the distance, a training arena activated. Tom took a deep breath. "Okay, let's do the proof of heart. Worst case scenario, I fail and get launched back to Earth with a fruit basket and minor trauma." "Worst case," Vayari said, her ears twitching. "You fall in love with me." Tom stared. That's not worst case." "Then you're already halfway there." Tom was instructed to report to the Chamber of True Echoes for the first part of the proof of heart. He arrived carrying a borrowed satchel, a worried expression, and what he hoped was a dignified stance. The room greeted him with a trumpet flourish played by a trio of floating crystals that then whispered to each other about his posture. A guardian in a gown made entirely of shifting clock faces stood at the entrance, tapping a staff that counted backward. "Trial 1. Loyalty. You will enter a simulated memory hall. You will face moments where you must choose between self and others. The simulation will adapt to your instincts." "Will I remember it's a simulation?" Tom asked. The guardian tilted its head. "Yes, but your emotions won't." "Great. Emotional identity theft. Let's go." He stepped through a door that dissolved into static. Suddenly he was back in his old Earth apartment, sitting on his lumpy couch, clutching a half-eaten burrito. The air smelled of expired salsa and regret. Across from him sat Vayari, looking remarkably casual in a hoodie that read Galaxy's OKAYEST Princess. "This is definitely a trap," he said. She held out a folder. "Inside is a contract. Sign it and your life goes back to normal. No palace, no princess, no public vomiting on interstellar television. You'll be safe, anonymous, free." Tom opened the folder. The contract had his name, a long list of privileges waived, and an image of his face looking 30% more confident than usual. He blinked. "This is the loyalty test. You're offering me my old life back, with better lighting." "No tricks," the Vayari simulation said. "Just a door, sign and walk out." He stared at the pen, then at the burrito, then back at Vayari. She wasn't watching him with expectation, just curiosity. "I miss the silence," he said slowly. "The plants, the lack of glowing eyeball bureaucrats, but I also kinda like your chaos. And your ears do this thing when you're sarcastic, like a radar dish caught a joke too early. He dropped the pen. I'm not signing sorry, I like the weird ride. The room dissolved in a burst of confetti made of light. The Guardian reappeared, nodding. Trial 1 complete. Loyalty confirmed. You almost failed when you hesitated about the burrito. Understandable, Tom muttered. It was emotionally complex. He was guided next into a hall with suspended prisms, all showing scenes from different timelines, some his, some not. One showed him as a glamorous talk show guest with suspiciously good hair. Another had him captaining a cargo ship full of sentient pickles. The next trial, he was told, was about intention. You will be shown outcomes, said a voice that sounded like thunder trying to be polite. Pick the one your heart leans toward. Each prism hovered, awaiting a tap. One showed Vayari and Tom ruling together, respected, regal but distant from each other. Another showed them escaping royal life to live in obscurity, running a galactic bakery for tired travelers. A third had him staying on Celeria alone, helping reform the palace systems, while Vayari was shown off-planet, leading rebellions or causing them. Tom stared at each prism, then tapped the bakery. The prism sang. Literally, a sweet melody burst forth as baked goods danced in celebration. Really? The voice asked, somewhat judgmentally. You choose pastries. Have you seen her frosting technique? It's terrifyingly precise. The prisms vanished in a swirl. Trial 2 complete. Intention, aligned. Slightly carbohydrate-oriented but acceptable. Before the third trial began, Tom was offered a snack break. He accepted immediately and sat on a cushion shaped like a sleeping cat. The food was a steaming bowl of color-shifting soup and a beverage that tasted like nostalgia mixed with a hint of rebellion. Vayari joined him a few moments later, her hair woven with thin metallic filaments that sparked softly. "How's your heart?" she asked. "Beating erratically. Might be the soup, or the pressure of impressing your terrifyingly elegant mother." "She likes you more than she shows," Vayari said, sipping from her cup. "She hasn't threatened to erase your species from planetary history. That's progress." "Romantic. The third trial's the hard one," she continued. "Instinct. You won't be briefed. No rules, just reaction." Tom wiped his mouth and stood. "Good. I love being unprepared." They walked in silence toward a chamber that looked like a giant clock spinning in reverse. As soon as Tom stepped inside, the floor vanished and he was falling. No ground, no sky, just endless motion, then stillness. He was on a small platform surrounded by nothingness. Opposite him stood a duplicate of himself, same hair, same nervous stance, same slightly bent nose from a high school frisbee accident. The duplicate smiled. "You think you're ready for love?" it asked. Tom frowned. "Are you my anxiety?" "Close, I'm your self-doubt. Here to test whether your instincts lean toward growth or retreat." "I liked the burrito trial better. Answer this. If everything goes wrong, if she stops choosing you, if the world turns cold, will you still stand beside her? Even when it's not easy." Tom hesitated. His duplicate leaned closer. "Even when you're ignored, dismissed, overwhelmed." Tom looked down, then up. "Yes, even then." The duplicate blinked. "Even when you feel small." "I've always felt small," Tom said, "but that didn't stop me from showing up." The duplicate smiled, then dissolved into stardust. The platform vanished. Tom fell again. Then he landed back on his feet inside the chamber. Waiting there, not the illusion but Vayari herself, her expression unreadable. "You passed," she said. "How do you know?" "The final test sends a signal to my family crest," she said, tapping a glowing symbol on her collar. "Also, you look like someone who just wrestled his own insecurities and stole their lunch money." Tom exhaled, shaky. "I think I need to sit." She looped her arm through his. "You'll want to stand. My mother is about to enter." A wall of silk parted, and in walked the queen, flanked by guards whose armor gently emitted lullaby music. The queen approached Tom and studied him. Then, with a single nod, she said, "Acceptable." Tom nearly collapsed with relief. I've dreamed of hearing those exact words from a girlfriend's mother. She's not your girlfriend, the queen replied. She's your soon-to-be wife, unless you perish from nerves. I'll try to survive, he said, voice cracking. The queen turned to Vayari. He has heart, humor, and absolutely no idea what's coming. Perfect, Vayari said, just my type. Tom stood in front of a mirror that refused to reflect him properly. Instead of his image, it showed possible outcomes. One had him slipping on ceremonial robes and face-planting in front of 7 intergalactic dignitaries. Another featured him forgetting the princess's name and accidentally marrying her cousin, who was made of bees. The third was just him screaming into a muffin. A floating orb buzzed beside him and gently nudged his elbow. You're due on the royal terrace in 9 minutes. Would you like a final affirmation, a sedative vapor, or a statistically accurate wedding rehearsal simulation? I'd like a donut and a chance to hide inside a couch. The orb beeped sympathetically. We're out of donuts, but you've been cleared for light whimpering. He sighed, turned, and was met by Chib, the sarcastic translation drone assigned to him since day 2. Chib looked the same as always, vaguely judgmental, unnecessarily aerodynamic, and covered in scratch marks from Tom's attempts to turn it off during sleep hours. Ready to disappoint the entire galaxy in formal wear? Chib asked. Not until I've spilled at least 1 cup of punch on royalty. That's the spirit. Tom followed the hovering attendants through the palace. Guests lined the walls, royal houses, species from spiral arms and asteroid colonies, beings with too many legs and not enough patience. A chorus of aquatic creatures performed an overture using vibrating water. Somewhere in the crowd, he spotted the codex keeper enthusiastically blinking in approval. The queen sat on her floating throne, expression unreadable, possibly due to ceremonial face mist. Then came the sound that now reliably made Tom's knees turn to pudding, Vayari's entrance. She walked beneath an arch of anti-gravity petals, wearing a gown composed of refracted starlight, each movement rippling through space itself. Her long ears were braided with living threads that pulsed gently to her heartbeat. When she smiled at Tom, the chandelier above them briefly shed joyful sparks and fainted. You made it, she whispered. I'm wearing a robe that adjusts itself whenever I think about sandwiches, Tom replied. But yes, I made it. The officiant was a triple-headed oracle with a voice like wind through stone and a tendency to forget which timeline they were in. One head began the ceremony. The second interrupted with a correction from the future. The third apologized and offered a snack. Eventually, they reached the vow segment. Vayari spoke first. I chose you because you were unafraid to be confused, because you asked questions that no one else thought to ask, and because, even when everything was absurd, you looked for meaning. And the nearest exit, I admire both. Tom cleared his throat. I came here for free food. I stayed because somehow you saw something in me worth keeping. You challenged my comfort zone, then kicked it into a wormhole. And I guess, I love that I love you. Someone in the crowd wept, possibly the queen. Possibly the diplomatic onion delegation. The officiant declared the bond sealed. A beam of golden light wrapped around them both, translating emotion into energy, tethering thought and instinct. The crowd erupted in respectful applause and 2 minor explosions of celebratory gas. Confetti cannons launched particles shaped like Vayari's ears, which Tom caught and promptly sneezed into. The reception took place in the 0G ballroom, which Tom immediately regretted entering with a full stomach. Floating tables spun gently. A band made of crystalline beings played music so beautiful it caused plants to bloom spontaneously. Chib hovered nearby, delivering translation and insults in equal measure. Vayari led him in a dance that involved more floating than stepping. He bumped into a minister from Gloreth and apologized in 4 languages. The minister congratulated him by offering a ceremonial rock, which Tom pretended to understand. Later, during the royal toast, the queen stood, lifted her cup and said, "He's odd, he's unpredictable. He cannot navigate a hallway without assistance, but he's loyal, and somehow my daughter's eyes smile more when he's near. I approve." Tom blinked. Was that sincere? From her, that's basically poetry. After the guests had departed, the stars outside the palace glittered across the night sky. Tom and Vayari sat on the balcony, exhausted but content. "You did it," she said. "No planetary incidents, no collapses, no dual challenges from insulted suitors." "There's still time," Tom said. "I saw the gift list. Someone gave us a plasma swan. That's a safety hazard." She leaned into him. "You've changed. I feel taller. Not physically, just more you." He considered this. "I think it's because, for once, I wasn't trying to impress anyone, just survive. And it turns out that being yourself works better than pretending to be a galactic smoothie."